Hey guys, thanks for checking out this new Utopia 9 video. This is probably going to be our last full documentary on the product. We're going to kind of go over everything that's in Utopia 9 and give you a full walkthrough of what everything is. So, getting started, obviously you've launched Unity and you have installed the Utopia 9 package, which you see here. You can kind of scroll through here and take a quick look. In the decals folder, we have a set of decals that we use. We integrated Utopia 9 with decal system, and Andy from Edelweiss was a very big help with getting that going. We have a demo scene that we'll take a look at here in a few minutes. We have some documentation in the documentation folder. Our editor, the piece of code that we're actually going to use to build our scene is here. We have a very basic physics material we use. Decal system lives here in the plugins folder. All of the prefabs that we use in Utopia 9 can be found in the prefabs folder. Then we have a subset called super prefabs, which you can see these are kind of built up a little more so that we just kind of connected some of the different ones together for you to give you some building blocks to work with. Under the props folder we have one prop right now, and it's really more of a scene accent. It's a light that we attach to some places. We've got a script for opening and closing doors. The shaders that we've shipped here, these use the different texture maps that we've shipped. And then we went ahead and bundled the standard assets and standard assets mobile to give you a first-person controller just to get started. So the first thing we want to do is to start a new scene in Unity. So let's go File and New Scene. And doing so will give us a blank canvas. We have nothing in our scene except a main camera. And we're actually going to delete that. So let's just delete that main camera. And the one case to where you'll really ever have to drag anything out of the Utopia 9 assets is going to be the first-person controller, should you decide to use it. We really designed Utopia 9 generically, assuming that you probably have your own character controller that you want to use. But we do have this one here, just if you want to get started. So we'll just drag that over here, and it will give us just a very basic first-person controller. We don't really have to do anything to it. It's got its own graphics and camera and, different controls like slope limits, etc. One thing you may want to do is to go ahead and set your slope limit to 90 because there's going to be some stairs that we're going to climb. So the next thing we're going to do is to go ahead and open up the Utopia 9 editor, and that can be found by going to Window, Utopia Works, Utopia 9, and the Level Builder. And this will launch our editor. And let's just go ahead and dock it over by the inspector, and we'll take a quick look at some of the features here. As we start adding stuff to the scene, you'll notice that the active target will change, and this is going to be used for some of the different operators like the rotate left and rotate right, the translate controls. These will affect whatever is the active target, and the active target can be pretty much any game object in Unity that has a transform. So it could be a Utopia 9 piece, or it could be a camera, or anything really. It's there's just some nice tools that we put in. We'll see, for example, how we've got velocity sensing controls on the move. So as you press and hold down on this button, you'll see the controls start to accelerate. So if you have a large distance to cover, you can just press and hold down on that. So getting started, the first thing we want to do is to add a new Utopia 9 group. And we like to work with groups because as your scenes get built, as your scenes get bigger, you'll notice that they get kind of hard to manage. So if you partition these off as new groups, it's easier to copy and paste them and reuse them. So if you just build out a hallway, for example, build it in its own group, and then if you want to use it for something else or you want to rotate the whole hallway, it's all encapsulated in its own group. So the first thing we're going to do is let's add a blast door. So we'll click blast door, and you'll see that immediately put it on the scene. So in a Utopia 9 group, when you make a new group, you'll notice in the inspector that it always goes to 0, 0, 0 in the world space, which is a good reference point to start with. So if we look here, we are at 0, 0, 0. If we take a look back at our first-person controller, you'll notice that when we dropped it on the screen, it put it at -30 and 3 and -74. So let's go ahead and zero this guy out too, just so he's in a good spot to where we can use him later. Okay, so back to the Utopia9 editor. You'll see that we added the blast door, and it is the active target. So if I wanted to start doing some move operations on that, like a rotate, well, because this door is the active object, that's what's being rotated. So let's go ahead and add some more geometry to the scene. Let's put a frame around this door. So we'll do a hallway arch here, and we'll then zoom in on it. And you see now we have a nice frame around our door. I'm going to go ahead and turn zooming off, and we'll come back and explain that a little later. So now let's add some more geometry. Let's put a hallway segment in, and you see now we've got this nice hallway segment. And you'll notice that I'm not having to drag anything around really. Utopia9 just knows pretty much where to put stuff. So it knows, you know, based on where the last piece was, where the next piece should go. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's turn the scene lighting on just so we can get a preview of what we're going to be dealing with in terms of lighting. We're going to come look at some of the skins a little bit later, but just to give you a simple idea of how the scene comes together, I'm just going to kind of quickly click through some of these and build this out. Let's go ahead and add some more hallway segments, and then we'll just cap off the door. So this is going to give us a nice, simple hallway to start with. So if we were to run this, well, we probably need to bring our first player controller up a little bit because he's already falling through the floor, but let's bring him up. Bring him out a little bit. Alright, so now if we run this, you'll see we get a standard first-person view, and we can kind of look around, and we'll go walk through our hallway, and there we go. So all these prefabs come pre-mapped with all the physics settings that they need. So, you know, they're pretty much ready to go. They've got colliders built in. So, you know, this is, you know, at a very basic starting point, you know, a hallway. So let's go ahead and stop that. And let's take a look at some of the other stuff that we'll be doing in Utopia. Well, actually, let's take a look at this. I talked earlier about the groups. So let's kind of collapse this and see what all we've built. So we have this master group, and if we zoom out, we'll see that that's selected everything. Then we have our blast doors. So if we, you know, double click on those, we'll see that, okay, those are those. And then we have our hallway arches, which we've added. And then we have our hallway segments. And another thing that we do is when creating these prefabs, we actually go ahead and attach some other things in there to make things easier for you as well. For example, we talked about the prop, the light pole. So you can see one here. That's one of the light poles that we use. That's the other one. Well, we go ahead and also attach lights to these. So we have some spotlights built into these, and they create a nice ambient mood lighting for it. And we'll get more into affecting the whole scene lighting here in a few minutes. So another thing that we add is, as I said before, we integrate a decal system into it. So now you can see here is the decal system. And we've put in a default decal holder, and we put in a mesh render and a projection group to start with. So each of the decals that we ship by default comes with 4 variants in the decal pack, and we went ahead and shipped I guess 6 to start with. So we have blood, we have one that's like cracks, we have some foliage, some general grunge, and ice and smoke. We'll take a more in-depth look at those here in a few minutes too. So now let's get back to our scene. Let's go back to the Utopia9 editor, and I want to show you some of the real powerful features of Utopia9. Let's do this. Let's go to options, and the first thing we wanted to take a look at is the skin pack. So skin pack, as it sounds, these are the different skins that we have for the prefabs that we put together. And each of the skin packs comes with diffuse maps, specular maps, and normal maps. So right now we've loaded one called black and gold. Let's take a look at the default. So it's going to take a second to clean itself up, and what it's done is it's reassigned all of the shaders to the right or to the matching map file, or texture map file. So this is our default, so it's a very clean, very utopian type of sci-fi. We'll take a look at grunge, and this is a just a real dirty, rusty looking thing. Now you'll notice that it's pretty dark right now, so what we can do to fix that is let's go to colors and let's make sure that global lighting is checked. And what that global lighting means is that we're going to affect every Utopia9 light. So all of these lights that are labeled Utopia9 will be picked up by this. So the first thing we want to do is start messing with the overall lighting color. Now it's still fairly dark in here, so what we can do is affect just the general texture color. So if I bring it over in the red space, you'll see, okay, well that's pretty dramatic, and so you just, you know how you'd use any color picker in Unity, but if you want to see what the true neutral versions of these textures look like, just set them to white. We also have some specular settings built in, so if you want to affect the specular shine, you can toggle this back and forth. Also the overall lighting level. Now this doesn't do anything with the ambient lighting in Unity. This is the projected light from these lights. The bottom section of lights here deal with more detailed lights, which we'll come into look at a little bit later, to where we have more of a point and click style editor to where you just click where you want to add accent lights. So let's go back to options and look at some of the other variants that we have. Blacker and Golder. This is one that we didn't ship with the default package. This is going to be an expansion that we put up on the asset store. But you can see just how quickly you can alter the mood of your scene by just switching from one pack to another. Sand is a really nice subtle pack, which is really fun to play with the lighting for. So if we come in here and let's do something in kind of a greenish space, and so you can see how fun it is. So what we're doing right now is we're affecting the default lights, but let's go ahead and paint in some new lights. So let's do this first. Let's tick the checkbox for enable light painting, and we need to tell it how intense we want these lights that we're going to add to be. So let's just put it right in the middle there. And now let's pick the color that we want to paint. So let's paint in a red light, and then we'll just click here. And you'll see that we get a nice color accent there. Now if you have your your rotate translator selected, the click button will not do anything, which is a nice thing, because otherwise you'd be adding lights in places you don't want. So let's pick another color. Let's go somewhere in the blue space, and we'll add some blue light here. So what it's doing is it's actually doing a ray cast and finding the vertex based on the mouse. So it's finding the vertex that matches where we were and actually placing the light there. So if we go and bring the gizmos up, you'll see, oh, okay, well that's where that light went. So it doesn't actually put it on the vertex, because that wouldn't do us a whole lot of good. We actually want to back it up so it has room to shine on where you want it. Now the accent lights, if you take a look, actually get implemented, let's go ahead and select one, as point lights, whereas the default Utopia9 lights that we do, they come in as spotlights. Now you'll also notice that the lights that we added, the detail lights, are here in the same hierarchy, so they just show up as a Utopia9 light detail. So if we go back to Utopia9, we can take a look at some decals. This is where making your scene gets pretty fun. So let's go to the decal editor and let's select the decal pack we want to work with. Let's start with blood. So we want to say the decal scale and how big we want these to be painted as. So let's just go kind of right there in the middle, and we're going to turn decal painting on, and I'm going to go ahead and then enable random rotation. That way it kind of breaks up the monotony of decals looking cloning stamps. So I'm just going to start clicking around, and you'll see that we're just using the same decal over and over. Let's go ahead and shrink these gizmos down. That's kind of in the way. Okay, so that's how that works. Now let's go ahead and select a different flavor of the blood decal, and now we're going to be painting a different one. And so we'll just put some up here on the wall, we'll put some here on the floor, and anywhere you want to put them. So we'll just zoom around and start painting our scene. Alright, so that's blood. Let's go ahead and add some cracks. This is kind of fun to do. Let's put these here. So we'll put some cracks in the floor here. which this will probably look better if we switched over to the oxidized. This is one of the skin packs that we've sent in, and it gives a little more normal map depth than some of the other skins do. So we'll go back to decals, and let's just add some more cracks in. So you see how quickly you can really influence your scene and add some, you know, random variety to it. Foliage, you know, we get some different leaves, some different stuff you want to put in. Grunge, you know, here's some rust and just some, you know, some dirt and grime you can put in your scene. Let's put some grunge in over here. Let's just kind of sprinkle this with some different color. And let's put a couple of rust spots in. So now, you know, our scene is definitely starting to have more dynamics to it. Let's go ahead and run it and take a look at what we're getting. So now, as we run through our scene, you'll start to see some of our lighting and some of our decals, and they look pretty good. You'll notice that our draw calls are a little high right now, and that is going to change once we do a light map bake, and if you have Unity Pro, we'll do an occlusion map bake. So let's go ahead and stop the scene and see what else we can do. We do have an option to select your target platform. Right now we have desktop and mobile, and what this will do is really dramatically decrease the amount of texture space you need. The default textures that we shipped are 2048 by 2048, and they're very nice, very rich, very detailed. And then if you switch over to mobile, you'll see that, okay, we lost some quality, but it's a much smaller texture file. It's a 512 by 512, and it runs fantastic on iOS devices or Android devices, whatever your device is. So let's just put it back to the desktop. So let's take a look at some of the rotation features in Utopia 9 and some of the placement features. What I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse everything over here and take my group. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the active target. And you can do that by clicking this button here, which is the active target group. So now you'll see that the active target is the Utopia 9 group. So if I rotate, now I'm rotating that entire group around its origin point. If I wanted to move it in its X, I can click these buttons and I can move it into Y and move it into Z as well. If I want to zero it out, I can click this button and it'll put it back at 0, 0, 0. Another nice feature we have is zoom tracking. So as you're adding new pieces or as you're moving pieces around, you can say how closely you want to follow, or you want the scene camera to follow. So let's do this. Let's take this entire group and move it over to the side. And we're going to add a new group. And we're just going to add some quick geometry to it. So right now you'll see that I've got zooming turned off, which this certainly has its place, because maybe sometimes you want to make some very minute adjustments and you don't want the camera to keep following you. But if you do, you just tick this on and you tell it how close or how far you want the camera to go. So we're just going to start adding, and so this at zoom tracking 50 is pretty far away, and then if you zoom in you'll see that we get a bit closer in. So now we've made a pretty long haul, and we've got our default lighting in there. So that is that. So we really don't need this group, so I'm going to just get rid of that group. And we'll come back to this one. We'll retarget it and re-zero it. And now it's back at the center world axis where it needs to be. So these are the basic mechanics of Utopia 9. You can feel free to experiment and play around. All these settings are pretty self-explanatory in what they do. The decals and the colors, the options and the skins are there. So let's talk about performance. So right now, let's relaunch it and let's look at our draw calls. So we got 31, and we hit 93, 138. So what can we do to bring that down? Well, obviously the first thing you can do is to work on a light map. So let's do that. Let's bring up our light mapping, and let's just dock this over here. And we'll go to bake, Now, for the sake of this demo, I'm going to do a low quality bake. You are more than welcome to do a high quality bake if you want, but you probably really won't need it with Utopia 9. So let's see how long this takes to bake. Yeah, let's save our scene. We'll just call this our test scene. And it shouldn't take too long to bake this, as it's a fairly straightforward scene, but I'm going to go ahead and pause the video for now. Okay, welcome back. So now we have baked our light map, so you can see what we're looking at for our light map here. So we're going to do a couple of things real quick, and we're going to rerun the scene and see what the reduction in draw calls is. So you'll notice that we have this checkbox here for enable scene lighting. So when you're ready to go into production and start testing this out, you want to uncheck that. And that is going to take those lights out of your scene, because we really don't need them now that we've baked our light map in. So when we run our scene now, we're going to see a pretty dramatic decrease in draw calls. So, you know, from that 100 and something we saw before, we're down to 18, 16, 12, etc. as you go. So the next thing we want to do is, if you have Unity Pro, you want to go ahead and do your occlusion culling. And with the occlusion culling, you probably won't see too much here because this is a long straight hallway. You'll see when I load up the demo scene here in a few minutes how that really comes in handy. But for baking Utopia 9, I typically like to do the smallest occluder as 0.5 instead of the default. And let's go ahead and get that baking. This will go pretty fast. You'll see that this will go really fast. So it's computing it and it's done. So now when we run our demo scene, we're going to have pretty much the same effect on the draw calls, 17 or 18, which is fine. And once you start experimenting and building out larger scenes, you'll see where the occlusion culling really comes in handy with really bringing the performance of the whole system up. So let's just kind of tweak out. Actually, no, let's do this. Let's go ahead and load up our demo scene, and let's take a look at how it's put together. And it's, I don't really need to say that. It's a little more complex than the scene we were just looking at, but we'll go ahead and take a look-see anyhow. So in this scene, we have multiple levels going. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my skin over real quick, because this was really made for this particular skin that I made, which is this one called Blacker and Darker. So we're going to run through this one. Let me make sure that I've got light maps for this, and I should, yeah, okay, I've got my occlusion set up. So let's run through this demo scene. And now this is a bit larger, obviously. It's going to take a few seconds to load up. And here we go. So you'll see our draw calls are very low, and our memory usage is very low. You'll see that it's kind of lagging and jerking, and that's really because of the screen recording software I'm using now is using a lot of memory, and I'm not actually using my GPU. This is all done on CPU right now, so it's a little jerky, but you get the idea. So now we're starting to see how this whole thing can come together. But just watch our draw calls as we're navigating through this. I mean, it's just very low, very, very high performance. You see some of the decals that we put in just for demonstration. You know, this is an ice decal that we put in, and you know, some of our effect lighting that we put in just to really demonstrate what the platform does. Here's some of the stairs that we have. And, you know, as you get a chance to really look at some of the different geometry and some of the different prefabs we put in, you'll see how they go. But we've tried to give you the ability to go up and down instead of just, you know, a flat planar surface. So we've got steps and we've got slopes that kind of give you, you know, more ability to build a, you know, a true 3D level. So here we have a slope, and we have some steps up there. Here's another room that we have, and we've got the door here. But yeah, I mean, our draw calls are just fantastic. And you know, the meshes themselves, as you start to look through them, they're very high performance meshes. We reuse a lot of the same UVs over and over, so the performance that you're going to get out of it is just amazing. So let's take a minute and look at what we have in the package itself. So if you start at the core, you see that we've got all these folders. Our decals, we talked about these. And as you use decal system, you'll see that, you know, this is what you're using. Here's our actual, you know, decal image itself. It's just a PNG file. We have an XML file that really describes the 2D geometry of what each decal is. That's in this file. We have the material itself. So if you look in the inspector, you can actually see the material. These materials are all set up to use normal maps, so we ship normal maps. And we also ship thumbnails of each of them, which you see in the editor as you're placing different ones, like this one that you see here. So that's the blood decal. We can look at cracks. This was the one we used earlier, so you can kind of get a sense for what those are. The foliage, these are more of, you know, your greens and leaves and ivies and things like that. So if you wanted to make more of a organic looking scene, you'd use that. Here's our grunge decal set. So we've got some rust and some different smudges and speckles and different oxidized pieces in there. And ice, we've got some different ice effects. So if you wanted to make like a frosted over looking level, you could do that. Smoke is interesting in that, you know, if you just want to add, you know, burnt effects or you know, soot or any type of, you know, just burned out looking scene, this is a great tool for that. So that's that. Let's look at the demo scene. The demo scene has the demo level. It's got a README file, which kind of goes over the stuff we already talked about with light mapping and the occlusion culling. You know, here's all of our light maps for it. Next thing we'll take a look at is the documentation folder, which has a very simple README in it. Doesn't really go super in depth. We really wanted to get this in more video format because everybody loves to do video tutorials. The editor, this is the code that actually runs the Utopia9 editor extension that we use here. We've got an XML file that kind of contains some of the definitions of what the geometries are, and we've got some different graphics and such in the resources folder. We've got a physics material which is used for the collision on the door switches. The plugins folder is used for the decal system, so their code lives in there. All of our prefabs are here, so if you wanted to come in and actually see what these are, you can look at them here. You can pop up the inspector and see what all is being used on them. So if we look at just look at the blast door, for example, it's got a transform, it's got a mesh filter, it's got a mesh renderer, it's got a mesh collider. The door is a special case in that you can have it both static and dynamic. So if you want to have a locked door, you'd use one variant versus the other. So we've got our rigid body on it, and here's the material that we use. It's one of the shaders that we shipped with Utopia9. So you'll see all the colors that we've set, here, the green and the brown, etc. As you make those changes, it's actually going to each of the materials and setting those settings there. So let's do this. In prefabs, we've got our base prefab, and this is really the FBX export. So we did this in Maya. So if you wanted to go and look at this in Maya, you could take this material and bring it back out. So that these are all of the individual pieces that we shipped. I believe there are 19 separate prefabs. And we took those and extracted them out and actually put all the different things that we would need as far as components, etc. on top of them. All of our images, so as you are switching through different skins, this is what you're doing. You're going through and these are our mobile skins. Let's just look at our desktop skins. So as you go through and look at these, you'll see these are your textures. So let's look at blacker and golder. So here is this, and here it is in the inspector view, and you'll see that this is a 2048 by 2048. It's 2.7 megs in size, but naturally as you compile these, the Unity is going to resize them down as it needs. So you'll notice that your iOS build sizes are different than your Android build sizes versus your desktop build sizes. This is the default skin that we shipped, so it's a very vanilla. Grunge has just some good rust spots and oxidation on it. And you can kind of look at all the different ones that we shipped with there. We will be selling some additional skin packs as well in the asset store. Blacker and Golder being one of the ones that we're going to sell separately. We got this folder called Super Prefabs, and these are kind of like building blocks. You could spend the time and build your own large room, for example, but we made one for you, so we took all the different pieces that are required to build that and just made that to where you can just drag and drop that on your scene. There you go. So, but if you actually get in and start looking at the pieces that make this up, well, here's large room, and here's the group, and here's all the different stuff that makes that up. The props, we have essentially one important prop in here, which is the light pole. So this is used for decorating the scene and actually casting light. We've got a script called Door, and this is a C# script that actually opens and closes the doors as your character comes in proximity to them. Here are our shaders. So we have our standard Utopia9 shader, and we have a mobile shader, which gives you much higher performance. We have shipped the standard assets and standard assets mobile. We stripped these down because we really were only concerned about the first-person controls. So in the standard asset is the first-person controller, and for mobile you would use the first-person controls prefab and drop that onto your scene. So that really about sums it up. We're excited for Utopia9. We're hoping a lot of people are going to get it and make some amazing stuff with it.